Okay, thank you very much. Today, we would like to talk about uric acid and atrial fibrillations, the role of KV1.5 protein. To understand this topic, I think better to know about uric acid metabolisms, and then we have to know about the basic electrophysiology. So we will know about how atrial fibrillation will happen, and then later we will talk about the correlations and how uric acid could cause atrial fibrillation via KV1.5 protein. That's why the first background, we would like to talk about the biosynthesis of uric acid. As we know that uric acid is the end product of purine catabolisms in human body. And this is the schematic on how purine catabolisms from adenosine or guanosine monophosphate to become uric acid. It's very complicated. The process from deaminase or dephosphorylations, it's very complicated. Finally, from these metabolisms, we could find the hypoxanthine, and then we need xanthine oxidase to oxidize the hypoxanthine to become the xanthine. And we need the xanthine oxidase to oxidize the xanthine to become the uric acid. And as we know that in human, we cannot change the uric acid to become more soluble compound allantoin because in human and also great apes, we lack of uric acid enzyme. That's why if we compare the uric acid level in human and the other mammals, we have higher level of uric acid. So this is the basic of the biosynthesis of uric acid. We have to know this process. And then about the urate homeostasis, as we said before, that is, the urate or uric acid is the end product of purine catabolisms. And we don't have uricase, that's why we cannot change the urate to become the allantoin. Yes, allantoin is more soluble than urate. It's easy to secrete it. But in human, we don't have this one. That's why we excrete the urate via urinary and gastrointestinal, around 80% from urinary and 20% from gastrointestinal. And this mechanism to maintain the homeostasis of urate level. Because if there is problem on the diet or maybe the problem on the excretory mechanisms, we will have the higher uric acid level. It will cause several diseases such as gout and cardiovascular disease and also renal stone or renal calculi. And the interesting of this process, why we lost uric acid enzyme, there are many hypotheses, but I'd like to mention one hypothesis because uric acid or urate have two opposite effect. One as oxidant effect and one as antioxidant effect. And our body need effect of antioxidant of urate because the effect of antioxidant of urate or uric acid have good potential, yeah, as compared to vitamin C. That's why our body need the level of uric acid in the physiological concentration. That's why there is silencing mutations. So that's why we lost this enzyme. This is hypothesis why we lost the uric acid enzyme to metabolisms. Next, after know the metabolism of uric acid, we know the conditions of we have to know the condition of hyperuricemia. From the development of guideline for the management of hyperuricemia and gout in Japan, third editions, and my professor, Hisatomi Sensei, is the lead or as the chairman of this guideline. We found that hyperuricemia is defined as a disease condition in which patients have a serum urate level exceeding 7 milligram per dl regardless of sex and age. Maybe if we found in another guideline, the number of the level of hyperuricemia is different. Some guidelines said that hyperuricemia start from 6.5 milligram per dl for women and 7 milligram per dl for men. But anyway, in Japan, make the simple thing to define hyperuricemia. 7 milligram per dl, both sex and age. And so what happened if there is hyperuricemia? Maybe the effect of hyperuricemia is different among people. Some people maybe have a urate level maybe 7.0 or 7.5, will suffering from gout and another disease related to hyperuricemia, but other people no problems. Maybe that's why the difference respond each people regarding to the hyperuricemia conditions. But in these sections, we would like to emphasize the effect of hyperuricemia in the correlation with one of the cardiovascular disease called atrial fibrillation. So why hyperuricemia could cause atrial fibrillations? And in this moment, I'd like to say thank you to Dr. Fatin and team from IUM because in this lecture exchange, I think it's better for me. I think it's better to share some information related to research because if we talk about the basic knowledge about physiology or other relations, I think team from IUM also have that special team that's expert in their positions. But that's why in this moment, I'd like to share about the research because research every people different. That's why in this moment I can sharing about information related to our research. Okay, next. What happened the hyperuricemia condition and atrial fibrillations? From several papers, like from Kuwabara et al., hyperuricemia is an independent competing risk factor for atrial fibrillations. Another paper from Kawasu, the title is about uric acid level and prevalence of atrial fibrillation in Japanese general populations. And also a paper from Sun Ji et al. Talking about the association between hyperuricemia and atrial fibrillation in rural China. And also my paper talking about the hyperuricemia as a risk factor for atrial fibrillation due to soluble and crystalline uric acids. And from this paper, we found that hyperuricemia have a positive correlation with atrial fibrillations. And this is ECG, come from the normal sinus rhythm, and this is the ECG from atrial fibrillations conditions. In the normal sinus rhythm, we could find the P wave, QRS complex wave, and also T wave. But in the atrial fibrillation, we cannot identify which one's the P wave. But for the QRS wave and the T wave, we can still can observe. So to know the positive correlation and how the mechanism from hyperuricemia to become atrial fibrillation, First, we have to know the basic electrophysiology. That's why in the next Picron, we just share about the basic electrophysiology. In the left side, we know that in the atrial myocytes, there are several ion channel, like sodium channel, calcium channel, potassium channel, and also co-transporter between sodium and calcium, and then active transporter, yes, to pump calcium and also sodium. This channel maintains the potential difference between extracellular and intracellular. And the right side, we see the actions potential. Yeah, there are several phases from phase 4, phase 0, phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 of action potential. Each phase, there are dominant ion channel. Yeah, there are different dominant ion channel. For the example, in the phase 0, the sodium channel, yeah, to invert the sodium is the dominant working in this phase. But in the phase 2, there are competing, or there are balance between inward and outward, between calcium and also potassium. And also the phase 3, the potassium channel working dominant as compared to the other channel. And each channel, like sodium channel, calcium channel, and also potassium channel, have a subtype, many. But in my research, I emphasize one type of potassium channel called KV1.5. So what happen if there are enhancement of potassium channel, especially KV1.5? So this is the basic. So when we talk about our research, maybe we can have the connection. So the next background and how hyperuricemia could cause atrial fibrillation. So from my hypothesis that hyperuricemia shorten the action potential duration of atrial myocytes via enhancement of KV1.5 current. So as we see in this schematic of myocyte action potential, the blue line, so the normal action potential, this just schematic, and the red line, so the atrial fibrillation's action potential. And my hypothesis is the enhancement of KV1.5 because of hyperuricemia could shorten the action's potential durations. And this is action potential. This feature is the action potential recorded from HL1 cell. As we know that HL1 cell is atrial myocyte cell line. That's why I did in vitro experiment. I take the cell line from atrial myocyte called HL1 cell. In this Patch clump experiment, we found that action potential durations, the flag one is for the control. It means there is no interference. But when we give the uric acid at 7 milligram per dl, it means the hyperuricemia conditions in culture medium, it will shorten the action's potential duration as compared to control. And this is the purple one is the uric acid plus 4-AP. 4-AP is an inhibitor for Kv1.5. So when we block the Kv1.5, the action potential durations will prolong, yeah, but still shorten as compared to control. So why the shortening of action potential duration could cause atrial fibrillations? As we see in this schematic, my colleagues Maharani Sensei said from her paper said that shortening of action potential durations by uric acid automatically will be followed by the reduction of refractory periods. This situation could be the substrate of re-entry circuit leading to atrial fibrillations. So this is one condition to cause the atrial fibrillation or to cause arrhythmia. Because to cause the arrhythmia, especially atrial fibrillation, there are many factors. Next, for my research purpose, what is the possible mechanism of uric acid induced enhancement of Kv1.5 currents? This is my research purpose. So there are several methods. I use the Western blotting and real-time PCR, and then radio label, uric acid uptake, and also PAT scan. And for the treatment, I use the uric acid at 7 milligram per TL for 24 hours in all experiments. So in the experiment 1, we would like to see effect of uric acid at 7 milligram per dl, this condition of hyperuricemia, on the protein and mRNA of Kv1.5. So we would like to see whether uric acid could enhance the protein or the mRNA level of Kv1.5. So let's see the result. Effect of UA or uric acid on the protein and mRNA of Kv1.5. Figure 1a show the dose-dependent effect of UA on the Kv1.5. So in this experiment, we apply several concentration of uric acid. So for the normal, we just give like a placebo. So and then the second group, uric acid at 7 milligram per dl. It means this is the normal concentrations or physiological concentrations. And the third one is uric acid at 7 milligram per dl to represent the hyperuricemia conditions. As we see, uric acid at 7 milligram per dl enhance the density of Kv1.5 protein. It means that UA at 7 milligram per dl enhance the protein level of Kv1.5. And statistically, from 12 sample, give the significant effect. But interestingly, when we see the level of mRNA, there is no difference between the control and the hyperuricemia treatment. So, from this result, maybe uric acid enhance the Kv1.5 protein, not via mRNA level, but maybe because of the post-translational modifications. That's why in the next experiment, I did just experiment to know the degradation of Kv1.5. As we see, UA or uric acid prolong the degradation of Kv1.5 protein as compared to control. So in the control or phase vehicle, the Kv1.5 protein as the substrate of potassium channel will be degraded faster as compared to the uric acid treatment, especially when we see at 12 hours and 24 hours. This is the significant difference. It means that UA or uric acid stabilize KV1.5 protein through slowing down the degradation of KV1.5. Next experiment, we would like to see the uric acid uptake by activation of urate V1 into HL1 cell. As we see that uric acid from extracellular could enter to the intracellular via uric acid transporter called urate V1. So in this experiment, we would like to see this uric acid uptake. That's why we use urate V1 inhibitor called benzbromaron. So we would like to compare if UA or uric acid without benzbromaron and with benzbromaron. And then we have a special UA called radiolabel. It means the UA already labeled. And then we will compare the concentration intracellular and extracellular. And then we compare the timing, how UA could be uptake. As we see in this experiment, uric acid increase by time, could enter into intracellular by time. It means that 1 minute we could find UA only a certain number, and then 5 minutes we have more, and then 10 minutes we have more. It means that UA could enter into intracellular. And then in other experiment, we'd like to see the effect of urate V1 inhibitor. In this one, we can see that uric acid at 7 mg per dl enhance the KV1.5 protein. And then urate V1 inhibitor, benzbromaron, together with uric acid, cannot enhance the uric acid KV1.5 density. So this is the statistical analysis. We can see that uric acid alone could enhance the density of KV1.5 protein. And control and uric acid plus benzbromaron cannot enhance like uric acid treatment alone. It means that uric acid, intracellular uric acid, stabilize KV1.5 via activation of urate V1. It means that not extracellular urate, but intracellular urate that can enhance the density of KV1.5. Density means the level of KV1.5 proteins. So the result of experiment 1, intracellular uric acid stabilize KV1.5 via post-translational modification. So the intracellular uric acid, not extracellular, enhance the KV1.5 proteins via post-translational modification. So there is a post-translational modification here. Not enhance the mRNA level, because when we see in the first result, uric acid cannot enhance the mRNA level of KV1.5. So next experiment, we would like to clarify the downstream mechanism of UA induced stabilization of KV1.5. So we would like to know the mechanisms from intracellular UA to enhance the KV1.5 protein or KV1.5 currents. So we would like to know the mechanisms, because in cell have many intracellular pathway, and maybe some researcher found certain pathway, But in my experiments, we would interesting on the special pathway. But maybe for the next experiment, we would like to see which pathway is the more dominant. Okay, the first category to the intracellular pathway is the PAKT, because from the Maharani papers, she found that intracellular UA could enhance the ROS. And another paper from Lepele, they said that ROS could enhance the PAKT pathway. So whether the ROS produced by intracellular UA could stimulate the PAKT to enhance the Kv1.5. That's why in this experiment we use the special agent like N-acetylcysteine and also wortmannin. Wortmannin is the PI3K AKT inhibitor. So what happened? The first, when we treated the cell with uric acid and also uric acid with N-acetylcysteine as an antioxidant, we can see that UA could enhance the density of Kv1.5, and then the MAC reduce, as an antioxidant, reduce the density. But interestingly, UA still enhance the density as compared to control plus antioxidant NAC. It means that antioxidant reduce Kv1.5 protein. So it means that intracellular uric could enhance the ROS reactive oxygen species. But in my experiment, we didn't check the ROS. We just did this experiment to represent maybe the antioxidant play an important role in this process. Next, we would like to see the effect of UA on the expression of PAKT or phosphorylation AKT. As we see in this experiment, UA at 7 mg enhance the Kv1.5 protein, and wortmannin abolish this effect. So if we abolish the effect of PAKT, because the wortmannin is the PI3K AKT inhibitor. So because when we see in here, when we check the PAKT level, uric acid could enhance, but wortmannin reduce. Yeah, this is the tubulin for the comparison of the protein level. It means from this experiment, we can find that UA or uric acid enhance the expression of PAKT, this one, and Kv1.9 as inhibitor for PI3K AKT abolish this effect. So from the second experiment, we found that UA facilitated PI3K dependent phosphorylation of AKT. As we see in this one, maybe from intracellular, could promote the PAK3 to enhance the Kv1.5. But we would like to see PAK3 will activate another protein. So we did the next experiment to clarify the role of protein quality control on the stability of Kv1.5 protein by UA. Because as the previous experiment, UA could enhance the Kv1.5 protein via post-translational modification. Because relating to the post-translational modification, so we have to talking about the protein quality control. So the protein quality control, to control the quality of protein, we have the two candidates, PHS1 and also HSP70. This is the protein quality control. Yeah, to control the quality of protein. So the protein will live longer as compared to the other. Yes. So because by I focus on these two proteins because from several paper, especially from Ting, in their paper found that PHS1 could enhance the KVN.5 protein because the PHS1 from this paper could enhance the anchoring protein of KVN.5. That's why the number of KVN.5 enhanced. And the second one from Hirota, from their paper found that overexpression of HSP70 prolong the degradation of KVN.5. So we would like to see the relation between the previous protein like PAKT and then the relation between this one. So we did experiment like this one. So effect of PI3K AKT inhibitor wortmannin on the enhancement of KVN.5 protein. And then PHS1 and SP70 induced by UA. As you see, uric acid at 7 mg per dl enhance the KVN.5. This is same like the previous one. And then uric acid at 7 mg per dl also enhance the PHS1, not in the total one. And also uric acid at 7 mg per dl could enhance the SB70. This is the interesting one. To know the interaction connection between the PHS1 and also SB70 with the PI3K AKT, as I mentioned before, I used the wortmannin as the inhibitor of PI3K AKT. And interestingly, the wortmannin abolishes effect of UA on KVN.5, PHSF1, and also HSP70. And this bar graph shows the statistical analysis. And from this experiment, we know that UA enhance the protein expression of KVN.5, PHSF1, and also HSP70. And wortmannin abolished them. So for this result, we know that UA facilitated phosphorylation of HSF1 and induced production of HSP70. And PHSF1 and also HSP70 are downstream molecule of PAKT, because if we block this PAKT using wortmannin, UA cannot enhance both PHSF1 and also HSP70. This is the important result, because we would like to know the downstream mechanism from UA to enhance the KVN.5. Next, we also did the fourth experiment to more confirm whether the enhancement of HSP70 is responsible for the enhancement of KVN.5 protein by UA. That's why we knocked down the HSP70 in the cell culture. So what happened when we knocked down the HSP70? UA can enhance the KVN.5 or not? So as you see in here, there are three groups, like control, scramble plus UA, and the siRNA HSP70 plus UA. Interestingly, when we did this experiment for scramble plus UA, still enhance the HSP70, of course, yes, and then still enhance the KVN.5 and also HSP70 as compared to the control one. But when we knock down the HSP70, so of course in this one we cannot find HSP70. And interestingly, the KVN.5 also reduced like this one, cannot enhance. And the PHS1, there is no effect, because this is knocked down after PHS1. It means that siRNA or knockdown HSP70 abolish effect of UA on the enhancement of HSP70 and KV1.5 protein. Okay, this is to emphasize the previous result, result 3, that UA facilitated phosphorylation of HSF1 and therapy increased HSP70 to stabilize KF1.5. So enhancement of KF1.5 because of the stabilization effect of HB70. It means the post-translational modifications. The last experiment, we would like to clarify whether enhancement of KF1.5 protein by uric acid also followed by its function. As we know that KF1.5 is the protein, this is the substrate of potassium channel called IKUR. So enhancement of KF1.5 protein also followed by current or no. So in this experiment, we did Patz-Clamp experiment. And as we see, this is the Patz-Clamp experiment. Yeah, from the control, and then uric acid treatment, and then siRNA again SP70 plus UA. In this experiment, yeah, we can find this one. This is for the control. And the scramble plus UA enhance the IKUR current or KV1.5 current. And then the siRNA decrease this current. Maybe this almost same with the control, but lower than the scramble one plus UA. And then we treated with 4IP. Yeah, this is 4IP, the KV1, this current. So in this experiment, we'd like to find only the KV1.5 current, this one, and we can find that maybe more easy to see in this line graph. So the scramble plus UA significantly enhance the current of KV1.5 as compared to the control and siRNA SP70 plus UA. It means that uric acid increase KV1.5 current of this current in this scramble as compared to the other groups. So the final result is the enhancement of KV1.5 protein by UA resulted in the increase of IKUR current in H11 cell. This, we can say IKUR or we can say KV1.5 current. This is the same name. It means this is the to determine the current come from the KV1.5. So the conclusion of our research that intracellular UA significantly enhance the expression of KV1.5 protein and channel current via post-translational modification of KV1.5. So the process is UA enhance the phosphorylation of AKT and phosphorylation of HSF1, leading to increased expression of HSP70. And because the enhancement of KV1.5 could shorten the extended durations, maybe in the clinical, UA could be the risk factor for atrial fibrillation. Okay, this is my experiment that I did when I took PhD course. So I'd like to say the special appreciation to my co-author, like my colleagues, yes, and also my professor, and also thank you for Dr. Fateh and team from IUM to give me chance to give this presentation. Okay, thank you very much, and maybe I give the time to the moderator, Dr. Fateh.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fikri. That is actually a very comprehensive presentation. I love the way you detail out how you conduct your experiment and the justification or like the reasoning, why you approach this pathway and why do you look at this protein. And I think it is a very good work. I open to the audience if you do have any question for Dr. Fikri.
Assalamualaikum. This is Prof. Sirajuddin from BMS. Dr. Fikri, it's very interesting to hear your talk. Very, as Dr. Fatin mentioned, very nice way you explain the thing, easy for us to understand how the experiment conducted and then what is the output and everything in detail. First of all, congratulations, very good work for obtaining the PhD at within the time period. Congratulations. My question here is a general question. I'm not going to the specific to your research, but general question I just ask about the uric acid. As a biochemist, just I'm interested. So normally we say uric acid is an antioxidant, isn't it? Uric acid is an antioxidant. But in your presentation, it can increase the atrial, maybe a risk factor for the atrial fibrillation you have mentioned. And then as well as one of the pathway you mentioned that uric acid can activate because of the RAS, it can reactive oxygen species, it can activate the PAKT. My question is, if uric acid is an antioxidant, how does it involve in the this activation in the atrial fibrillation? And you just, because this is a general question, just I want to ask the.
Okay, thank you very much for Prof. Sirajuddin for the nice questions. Yes, we can find several papers about the function of uric acid. As I mentioned before, that uric acid have the opposite effect. The first have effect on the as antioxidant, and the second one has effect on as oxidant, pro-oxidant. It means then the two different effects. From the question from Professor Sirajuddin, I think as I saw in my presentation, that I did several level of uric acid, from method treatment of uric acid, and then uric acid at the concentration of just 4 milligram per dl, and this the third one 7 milligram per dl. When we compare several concentration, only uric acid at high concentration could enhance the Kv1.5. It means the hyperuricemia conditions has effect as a pro-oxidant. It means it will promote the protection of reactive oxygen species. But maybe in the normal level, less than 7 milligram per dl, maybe 6 or 5, 4, uric acid still give effect as as antioxidant. So maybe the different effect as antioxidant or pro-oxidant based on the concentration of uric acid in our body. In the normal concentration, uric acid will effect as antioxidant. But in the high level or hyperuricemia, it will give effect as pro-oxidant. So when I use 4 milligram per dl, I cannot enhance in my experiment. I cannot enhance the Kv1.5 protein level. But if we treated the cell with 7 milligram per dl, maybe 8, 9 until 10, it still enhance the level of Kv1.5. Maybe that is my answer. Dr.
Yeah,
Professor.
thank you, Dr. Fikri. Because I think it's because antioxidant always is a two-edged sword, because it may have pro-oxidant when excess antioxidant excess level may become antioxidant that you have mentioned. Yeah, the pro-oxidant. And I think maybe extracellularly, what I can see, extracellular concentration of the uric acid can be an antioxidant. When the level is increased, then it go is intracellularly, then it can become an oxidant that may induce the oxidative stress that can lead to the phosphorylation, other events that could increase the K and the KV1.5 protein. Thereby, it can cause many diseases. It can cause a risk factor. That's what I can understand. Okay, thank you, Dr. Fikri.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. Sirajuddin.
Thank you, Prof. Anyone else has any question for Dr. Fikri? Our physiologist, Dr. Azrin, do you have any questions?
Assalamualaikum, Dr. Taufik.
Waalaikumsalam, Dr.
I'm
Maizura.
I'm Maizura from the same department as Dr. Fatin. Thank you very much for your very informative sharing on this topic. So I noticed in your slides that you study the action potential in cardiomyocytes. Do you notice during your work? Did you notice the shortage phase of the action potential in the cardiomyocytes, and did you have any findings on this the effects of this uric acid at the in the action potential of pacemaker cells? Thank you.
Okay, maybe I cannot clearly listen your voice, Dr. Maizura. Can you repeat your question? Sorry. Because yes, maybe not good connection, internet connection. That's why I cannot hear your voice clearly. So, Dr. Maizura, can you repeat your questions? Hello? Maybe Dr. Fatin, can you repeat Dr. Maizura question, because I cannot hear clearly from here.
I think Dr. Maizura asked, did you notice that the uric acid, does it shorten any phase in the action potential in the cardiac myocyte in your experiment? Did you notice any changes to the shortening of any individual phase in the action potential in those cells?
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Fatin, for to clearly the question from Dr. Maizura. Okay, this is a very important and very good questions. Yes, I did several experiments for with a PATSCAM experiment to see whether uric acids could influence the other currents. So I did the previously from sodium current and the calcium current, and so another potassium channel currents, because the potassium channel have many types. So I did in the KV1.2, KV1.1. But from my experiment, I just found that uric acid enhance. The uric acid influence or shorten the action potential duration, because when I check the current, its current, uric acid also enhance the current of the KV1.5 current only, not on the sodium current, not on the calcium current, only enhance the current of KV1.5. That's why the process of uric acid to shorten the action potential durations is because uric acid enhance the KV1.5 current, not the other currents. I think that's my questions, my answer, Dr. Maizura.
Dr. Maizura, is that clear, or do you want to ask another question?
My other question, Dr. Taufik,
Yes.
is it exerting the same effect in the pacemaker cell?
Yes, of course. Because when we see, because maybe in my experiment, I just use the atrial myocyte, not pacemaker cell. But as we see that KV1.5 protein dominantly present on the atrial myocyte, not on the ventricle, only the atrial myocyte. And maybe because the pacemaker cell like sinoatrial or AV nodes masih close to the atrial myocytes, maybe it give effect. But I'm not sure because if we want to see, we have to check in the pacemaker cell only. That's because yes, because many questions when I present my experiment, they asking about uric acid effect on the potassium or another current. That's one question. Is it effect on the ventricle or on the atrium? So yes, my answer is uric acid only effect on the potassium channel, especially KV1.5, not other potassium current, only KV1.5. And then KV1.5 protein dominantly only present on atrial myocyte, not on ventricle myocyte. So if there is a question, is this possibility in the pacemakers? Yes, maybe, but I'm not sure about that. Maybe that's my answer, Dr. Maizura.
Thank you so much.
Maybe
Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome, Dr. Maizura.
Thank you, Dr. Maizura and Dr. Fikri. Just for information, Dr. Fikri, Dr. Maizura is another physiologist in our department, and she has a special interest in cardiovascular physiology as well. Together with Dr. Azrin, Dr. Azrin is also another physiologist in our department, and both of them are doing research in the cardiovascular physiology.
Yes. Maybe the next time we can collaborate between IUM and also Sultan Agong Islamic University.
Oh yes, sure. Any other questions from the members of the department? Dr. Baia, Dr. Azrin, Dr. Nursida, Dr. Azulin, Prof. Imad. Prof. Imad is our head of department. Prof, do you have any question or probably anything to address to Dr. Fikri?
Yeah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. Thank you, Dr. Fikri, for sharing with us your deductive approach and reasoning and your flow of thoughts and reaching a conclusion about the connection between the level of uric acid and atrial fibrillation. I think that was an excellent, informative, and educational talk of how to do actually a good research. So thank you very much for trusting us for showing us your research findings during your PhD. And hopefully we can collaborate in the future. We can collaborate with many of our lecturers here in doing actually good quality research. So thank you very much. Wassalamu alaikum.
Waalaikumsalam. Thank you very much, Dr. Professor Imad, for everything. Okay, maybe next, maybe in the future we can collaborate because many people from many lecturers from IUM that interested on the cardiovascular experiment. Like also in my university, also interested in this aspect of experiment. Thank you, Dr. Fatin.
Assalamualaikum. Can I ask Dr. Fikri some general question? I am Dr. Nosida. Dr. Fikri, thank you for your interesting presentation. Usually my research, I use animal studies. So when you show your PhD work, it looks actually interesting and very high-tech and complicated lah to me, Dr. Fikri. So did you do that in Japan?
Yes, I did this experiment on Japan.
Japan. Okay. I just wonder, Dr. Fikri, the type or method you use, can we actually use it to study natural substance, like from herbs, plants? I mean, to see the effects on your, for example, on the cardiovascular related physiology or pharmacology. Is it done by any researchers that you know?
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for the question, Dr. Jaifa. Yes, as in my research, maybe I use the animal. Actually, not animal, but cell come from the animal. Yeah, because in my experiment, I only did the in vitro experiment. So that's why the next experiment, I'd like to do the experiment to add the animal. It means the in vitro plus in vivo. And for the question from Dr. Jaifa, as I know that because in my experiment, I only did in animal. It means that because we know that the uric acid level, usually we found it in the animal, in the human, not in animal. That's why if we did any animal, maybe it have the same, maybe just because we still don't did the research. For the animal, maybe will give the same effects, maybe. Because very easy, because we can find the level of uric acid in every animal. That's why we just give this hyperuricemic condition. It may be the pathway will affect. But for the plant, because the plant there is no discussion. Maybe I never found.
No,
The hyperuricemic condition.
my question is actually, can we we take a substance, active substance from the plants to study the effects on the hyperuricemia? That's what I'm asking.
This maybe just
Like
only
intervention, yeah.
Okay, maybe for the substance, maybe it's no problem, Dr. Fatin, because we need to maybe from this pathway, there are several level of protein. So with substance from animal that block maybe the PAKT or the PSS1 or SB70 to block the effect of uric acid.
Yes, yes.
To cause. Yes, maybe this is the potential because in Indonesia, we have like maybe in Malaysia also have the same. We study about the jamu. Jamu is like the traditional plant from our country, and like special substance from the several plant. And then we would look at we would like to know effect of this jamu to this several several disease. That's why if we interested on this cardiovascular disease and we know maybe several substance from plant have the effect on this effect, maybe we can add the substance from animal to this research via the in vitro or in vivo. No problems.
Yes, yes. Okay, thank you.
That's my answer. Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Jaifa.
Thank you, Dr. Nosida. Any other questions from the members of the department? Dr. Hanan, Prof. Salam, Dr. Fadli, Dr. Raihan, Dr. Roslina, Dr. Yusof.
Assalamualaikum. Assalamualaikum. Okay, Dr. Fitri, I'm Hazulin from, actually I'm from anatomy unit BMS department. Of course, this is not something that I'm really familiar since I'm doing anatomy, but I just wondering, do you think that from your presentation, do you think we can determine the intracellular potassium ion concentration in this myocyte cell line? We are using myocyte cell line, right? To support that the Kv 1.5 stabilization and the functionality of this potassium transport. Do you think we can do this?
Yes, of course, Dr. Hajuddin. So yes, in the PATS-CLAMP experiment, the PATS-CLAMP experiment has like a special program. So in this program, can select special channel currents, especially in my experiment, focus on the KV1.5 protein. Or it means if the enhancement of KV1.5 protein also followed by its current or not. So we need the PATS-CLAMP experiment. So in this PATS-CLAMP experiment, there is a special program to check the current of KV1.5. And then we just stimulate and then start the stimulation. And this experiment can find the special current just for KV1.5. So the special for KV1.5. If we need to check another current, so there is a special formula. This is the special formula for sodium current, this special formula for calcium current, and etc.
But this is not being covered in your study at the moment, lah.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Maybe just for the addition informations, maybe in Japan, because the good country, every laboratory have the good tools to do this many research. For the PATS-CLAMP, maybe almost every university have in Japan, but in Indonesia, for example, the PATS-CLAMP experiment only can be done in Indonesia University, because another university, they don't have this equipment. So the problem in Indonesia, if I want to do research on to know the current or potassium or calcium or sodium, I have to go to Jakarta and Indonesia University in physiology department also to do this research.
Yeah,
but I don't know, maybe in
sorry. I heard PATS-CLAMP is like a tedious procedure, so that's why I mean myself, I've never done this before, but I heard somebody who's doing this, so it's quite interesting. If we can learn about this. We have a very good opportunity to do this. Okay, thank you, Dr. Fitri.
Okay, you're welcome, Dr. Hajuddin.
Thank you, Dr. Hajuddin. I think we can all relate to the issue you are facing in your university, Dr. Fitri, because we also have some equipments that are not available in our university. And that is why collaboration is always encouraged. Because to purchase those equipment, it will be very costly, but to collaborate, we can probably allocate that fund to the other materials, right? I'm not sure. I don't think we have that PATS-CLAMP. Is it that the equipment?
Okay. Yes. Maybe as I mentioned before, maybe in the future we can collaborate to the research, because yes, as Dr. Fatin said, that if we can some experiment I do in my university, and several data can be done in the IUM, maybe it make the cost not so much. Maybe if need the PATS-CLAMP experiment, I also can contact my professor, also can be done in Japan. So from Japan, Indonesia, and Malaysia, and we can collaborate together. I think.
That sounds so great, Dr. Fikri. I don't think we have any other questions from the department. There's no question in the chat box as well. Probably just because we have some postgraduate students in our coffee talk this morning, Brother Omar, Sister Nawa. So probably if you can share some tips for our postgraduate students in managing their research life, probably some tips on how to keep yourself on track, especially during this challenging pandemic where everything is slowed down or put at halt. Dr. Fikri.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Fatin. Yes, usually when we want to do research, of course we have to know our patients, which track we like to do. Like me, I like to do research on the cardiovascular, everything about cardiovascular, and maybe the other maybe want to do research on the maybe neuro and the brain or something. The first we have to know our patients. Yeah, like me, for the example, I like the cardiovascular disease. That's why everything I did, I focus on the cardiovascular, like the atrial fibrillations and then atherosclerosis, everything about cardiovascular. And then after we know our patients, we have to know about the method to do the research. And not so many method you have to know. Only the one, at least one you have to know the detail from the A until Z. Because for the example, my previous professor said that I have to do the mainly doing the research using the Western blot experiment. So the main yes, my experience on Western blot is many because I did many times, maybe more than 100 times. Because when the first time I did the experiment, I always fail, and maybe good, but the result is not reliable. I did the same treatment, but not reliable. But after many times, I try to which one I did the wrong one. So after many times, I can do the research, especially Western blot, in good result and have the reliable result. So that's the second tip. The first tip is that we have to know our patient, and the second tips we have to know the first special method to do the research. After that, you can compete with another method to check the several protein. And then after that, we just try to do writing because after we have the data, we have to try to write what I found before, because to publish a paper is not easy. Many many reviewer maybe have the different idea. If so different idea, we will have many correction. If they have the same idea, maybe not so many revisions. So yes, we have to know our patient. We have to have the special method to do the experiment, and then we try to just try writing. Still study, no problem. Just writing, just writing. And then we ask my senior, my professor, to correct our letter, and then we can collaborate another professor to correct our writing, and then that's maybe tips for the postgraduate students to become focused on their research. Maybe that's my tips, Dr. Fatin, for the postgraduate student.
Thank you, Dr. Fikri. So know your passion, don't give up to master the technique that you really, the core technique in your experiment, and just keep writing. That is very valuable tips. And I hope we all gain something from today's coffee talk. I wish Dr. Fikri all the best in your career.
Okay,
And we are certainly looking forward to collaborate with you in the future. You can always get in touch with me or any of our members of the department to discuss on any future collaboration, or probably to do another sharing session. Probably you can arrange a similar session in your university, something like this, or we can do another coffee talk again in the future. So thank you, Dr. Fikri. With that, let's end our coffee talk today with Tasbih Kifarah and Surah Al-Asr. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much, Dr. Fatin.